The Lancet journal has released an article about 5 months ago called Counting the Dead in Gaza, Difficult but Essential. We've talked about it, I think, very soon after it came out, maybe the day of or the day after. And they've made a few claims in those that have been immediately taken by the media, taken by the commentators to almost as always argue against Israel. Well, now 5 months passed, and I think it's going to be an interesting to look back about uh, uh, well, one, what were the claims being made, how people in the media were using those claims. There were also a few predictions in that article, which I think might be interesting to go through, as well as I think pretty much we'll do an almost like a comprehensive view of how propaganda is being made, because I think you can clearly see it in the 5 months that happen about how something released in a reputable journal has been used by the people. So, Michael, I believe you were one of the people on that original episode. So maybe you can, for one, I believe you have also written for the um,
Lancet,
oh,
yeah.
for the Lancet, yeah. So
Oh,
can you?
Sorry?
that's impressive. I mean, the Lancet is a major publication. That's impressive, Michael. Or
Thank you,
maybe not that
Jonathan. Thank you.
impressive given.
No, no,
Yeah.
I think so, I mean, I've been fortunate. I've written for New England Journal and a couple papers there, and our phase 3 data for the last company that I founded with my wife. We published our phase 3 data, really a nice paper, and Lancet was frankly extraordinary and included a lot of data. And I think the paper is something like 18 pages or 17 pages. It's very nice. So yeah, from the scientific point of view, medical point of view, it's one of the top tier, certainly in the top five journals in the medical profession.
Yeah. So I'm wondering. There's just so many things to go through that I'm wondering what it's gonna. Well, just let me again start with you, Michael, because you was on the episode. How what do you think about how uh, how are you feeling about basically the whole article that was released? Again, this was just to let people know, and we'll go through some of it. This was basically just 5 paragraphs with pretty much no data behind it, nothing really concrete. But one of the biggest claims was that the deaths in Gaza could go up to 186,000 people, and so we'll go through how they came up with the number. But Michael, what do you think?
Well, obviously, it was hijacking a medical journal for political purposes, pure political purposes, with the pretension that there were editors involved and this was well vindicated and well reviewed and so on. And interestingly, at least I'm not aware of such a political approach, say, for the Syrian civil war, which is upwards of half a million people that have been killed, and certainly more as every day passes now with that war really going out of control. But it doesn't justify the fact that they even published this to begin with. They hijacked a medical journal to do it. They carried it under the auspices of this was a well-reviewed and thoughtful paper, which would come with the Lancet. And the other thing that I found the most objectionable back then, but I think is even more increasingly important now, especially that given that Hamas, who has been utterly defeated, but not defeated enough, and still has 101 hostages, is that it focused on the wrong question, which is who's responsible for any of the deaths in Gaza. And that, of course, was not a question because the idea is that somehow people that are attacked are responsible for everybody. So I found the whole thing despicable, disgusting. I can tell you that my company had boycotted because they have done, this is not the first very anti-Israel and very anti-Semitic article that the Lancet has put out or allowed. We had boycotted this journal for a few years until we were convinced by our board members, frankly, that Lancet had stopped doing this. And we published our paper there. It got into other really good journals. Lancet was certainly one of the top ones, but we decided to go with Lancet. And it was clearly a mistake. I certainly will not publish in Lancet for the rest of the time that I'm alive on the planet.
Yeah, now going to you, Anders, have you seen the story basically when it happened about 5 months ago, or have you heard about anything it since? And just what are your general
Yeah, no,
points?
this was actually my first contact with the article and with these numbers that they presented, and that since have been used left and right. But just to echo what Michael just said here, when it comes to these number and to kind of lay down the facts here, number one, most of them are based on the numbers coming out of the Gaza Health Ministry, which is a Hamas puppet, as we know. So you can't trust any of those numbers in the first place. Number two, we're at war. Okay, war sucks. War is hell. People die. If you don't want people to die, don't start a war. And number three, as Michael said, every single one of the people who have died, however many they are, and I guess at some point we might get a better number when people can go in and really do the count. Every single one of those deaths are on Hamas because they started this. They could have avoided the vast majority of them by laying down their weapons, by surrendering early on in this process. And then, when it comes to this article, it doesn't surprise me. Wasn't it Lancet that also published some questionable information during COVID that they got a bunch of criticism for? But I mean, we see this, it's almost a trend in not only medical journals, but many types of scientific journals or quote unquote reputable scientific journals that they have basically picked up a political agenda. I don't follow the Lancet closely, so I don't know if that is the case there, but we definitely see it with Nature and Science in the US and miscellaneous other articles. So that is not a surprise.
Yeah, and it could be, you could say, well, this is just a medical journal. They're just looking at the numbers. They're just, they're being neutral. They're just giving the numbers. But as I've said, it's a five paragraph story, and in the article itself, it calls for a ceasefire. It says, no, we need a ceasefire because these numbers are going to go up. Again, you could say, this is just what's going to happen. But when you prescribe what should happen and try to act, no, we are not being, we're not taking sides. We are not being political. I think even in the article itself, it says like, we're not trying to take political sides. But when you call for a ceasefire in a war, you are taking political sides. I mean, just imagine if there was someone calling for a ceasefire between England and Germany during Second World War. And it's like, oh, because the deaths are too high. I mean, yeah, you could say that, but you are absolutely taking sides when it comes to these issues. Jonathan, anything to?
I wouldn't trust any of those numbers. I wouldn't trust numbers from China, Russia, North Korea, or the Palestinians. Not any of those numbers. But the irony is how this Lancet article, because I guess this imprint has some kind of legacy or some kind of imprint, or it's impressive. It's used as propaganda. When we see this Lancet story dropped on Piers Morgan over and over again, on by all the leftists who are arguing against Israel. The irony is that although I don't believe the numbers, let's say the numbers are true. What is 100 and whatever, how many hundreds of thousands they say. Why then, to your point, Anders, has Hamas not submitted yet? If the numbers are so bad, why have they not submitted yet? And, Miss Rand wrote about this, and I'll do a bit of a shameless plug, but in a new textbook of Americanism, she addressed just this very notion of how do you fight a war? We've talked about John David Lewis's book, but, she wrote, basically the contradiction of, if I can quickly read it, she says, the contradiction of international law, the attempt to make the use of physical force, which is war, subject to some kind of law. You can't agree by mutual consent not to murder prisoners or not to bomb women and children if it can't be helped. But it's an agreement of, you can, but it's an agreement of no significance because the idea of a war means two groups of men have decided they cannot reach any rational agreement. and they resort to force. The standard is now who can bring the other one to submission by means of force. If they've been brought to this state, everything goes. There is no laws being observed or even an etiquette. If you consider that men are slaughtering each other and deciding issues by means of murder. So the whole idea that, well, Israel has a right to retaliate, but they're not retaliating in the right way it's such an insult in its face to what war is about. And if the numbers are so bad on the Palestinian side, don't you think they should submit pretty soon? Wave the white flag, bring back the hostages? This is their responsibility. Every single death is on their shoulders. Every day this goes on is on their shoulders. So the beef is with them, not with Israel.
Yeah, and so let's just listen to basically when this article came out. Muin Rubani spoke about it. For those who don't remember, Muin Rubani and Norman Finkelstein were the people, were the pro-Palestinian side during the Lex Friedman debate. So let's listen to what he took away from it.
The Lancet report, counting the dead in Gaza, it makes a shocking prediction that the number of Palestinians killed directly and indirectly could reach as high as 186,000. That's nearly 8% of the population of Palestinians in Gaza.
This letter concludes is that the number of indirect deaths that are attributable to Israel's military onslaught on the Gaza Strip constitute a much higher proportion of total deaths than those directly attributable to armed conflict, bombing, shootings, and so on. And on this basis, reach a figure of 186,000. It's, of course, an estimate rather than a precise calculation, but in my view, a very credible one. These people have obviously done their homework. Again, the Lancet doesn't publish just any letter it receives, but sifts through them carefully. And I think, it adds a lot to what are already plausible accusations of genocide against Israel by South Africa, now also by a number of other states.
So he takes the number 886,000 and he just takes it, well, okay, this is the new number what I'm working for. And just this was 1 minute 30 seconds long video and 10 seconds was the other person speaking. It took him only 80 seconds to again say Israel is committing a genocide. Now, again, so basically the way Lancet has came up with this number, it analyzed a bunch of conflicts and it said generally there are direct deaths and there are indirect deaths. Basically, direct deaths are from, you getting directly killed, while indirect could be, you debris falls on you or there's a famine. Famine can be part of indirect deaths, and that number can be anything from 1 to 15, basically the ratio. So it can be, so if they said 600,000 Palestinians have died, that could also be a valid number. They just picked the number 4 because I don't know, there was the most nice looking number. So if you take 1 to 4, 1 are from direct deaths. At the time, it was 37,000, as claimed by Gaza Health Ministry, and the 4 came out to 186,000. And it's clear that it's genocide.
I'll just say the joke of this is that there's no mention that Hamas hides all of their weaponry among the civilians. There's no even mention of that. It's not even kind of acknowledged at all. But I don't know, it becomes this echo chamber of one bullshit organization citing another one. And I'm sure the ICC is going to have this is going to hit the floor of the ICC about, oh, well, the Lancet published something. We all got to, and again, I mean, Miss Rand wrote about this, she didn't mention the Lancet in particular, but she wrote, how are you going to, she said, if it's tactically necessary to bomb civilians during a war, you have to. More than that, it's your moral duty to do so, because otherwise, what are you doing? A kind of medieval tournament where people are dying while waving ladies' handkerchiefs? Isn't that kind of it? I mean, Israel is being judged on, all these metrics that no other country has ever been judged on. Again, Ms. Rand, no laws can hold, nothing can hold, no morality can hold against a state of war. In a war, one party is the aggressor, and anything the other party does is morally justified because it's an act of self-defense. That is Israel, and that is why they should be defended.
Yeah, and just to bring up again, genocide is always brought up. It's always they always focus specifically on genocide, and by bringing this again, indirect deaths are something that does happen, but it's something that's not directly basically caused by the actions of the government. And by saying, because of this number, now it's even more clear that it's a genocide. It's like saying that the reason why 6 million Jews died during the Holocaust is because they randomly starved somewhere, not that they were put in actual concentration camps ready to be killed. I mean, again, just trying to compare these two things shows the real how this is straight up propaganda. The only purpose is to basically put as much stuff against Israel. It doesn't matter if it has any facts. But Michael, I think you snicker a bit when they said when he said Lancet doesn't just publish everything. But what did you think about?
Well, I like the line. The best line was they did their homework. That was great. What they did was they read a line from the Hamas propaganda machine about how many people died. But again, I go back to this issue that Jonathan beautifully put, based on Ayn Rand's thing, but you can even go back to the general concept of war. When someone's an aggressor, and Ayn Rand definitely does a beautiful job enunciating this clearly, but even before her, it was fairly clear that if someone attacks you, your job is to annihilate them, especially when they proclaim very happily on pulpits that they intend to continue to attack you until you're gone. And they have their own charter. Remember, the charter of Hamas is to annihilate Israel. So one of the problems I see with Israeli press machine, and to the extent that it even exists really, is that we get into this discussion about whether the accuracy of the statements, rather than going back up to let's ask whether the question is a relevant question. If half of Gaza had to be annihilated in order to save Israel, do it. Frankly, if all of Gaza had to be annihilated, clearly the US believed that all of Hiroshima and all of Nagasaki, those two cities, needed to be annihilated in order to stop the Japanese. Now, I understand that we have a lot of woke idiots today, and I'm saying that with all my love in my heart for them today, that believe we shouldn't have done that. We should have let more American soldiers die and should have accepted it. Because after all, the emperor told the Japanese to fly their planes into our boats and our ships, and that's okay, and to bomb us in Pearl Harbor and so on. And they told the Germans that they should exterminate 6 million Jews and 4 million other people, gypsies, gays, and so on. That was all okay because we had to be very careful about it. Thankfully, we didn't have those ridiculous people spouting off on social media back in those days. We need leaders in the US who come out with statements that are very clear. No country is perfect, but there is good and there is evil. And the countries that go for good need to be defended, especially when they're attacked. And the countries that are evil need to be destroyed until they stop causing harm to others. Full stop. That's all that needs to be said here. Not whether there are 186,000 that might die, and not whether it's 37,000, and who cares? And by the way, who knows how many terrorists are killed? But one thing's for sure, folks, we can say absolutely that, 8-9 months later after this article came out, that Hamas clearly hasn't been beaten enough to give up the hostages. So they think that we being Israel and hopefully eventually the US, should kill all of the Gaza people. And they actually said it in public. They said, the more civilians that are killed, the better. That's part of our propaganda. These are the way you answer this statement, not about whether they did their homework, which of course they did.
Yeah, I think specifically it was Sinwar who has said that and now I'm mostly paraphrasing, but something like fight against Israel requires a sacrifice of Palestinian people. It simply, there's no way to go around it. We need some Palestinians dead. Not all of you will survive if we are to beat Israel. And just Yeah, Jonathan?
I was going to say, I mean, Michael's point about, I don't know many young people, but I think his point about the end of World War II, thankfully, the end of World War II is so spot on about how the use of nuclear, bombs at the end of World War II is seen as terrible. How could we have done that? And, it sounds completely kind of heartless to say this, but it's the best thing that I could imagine that could have happened to the Japanese people. I mean, within 20 years, they would completely turned around an entire civilization. The Japanese people became wealthy, they became prosperous, part of the real functioning world. But those ideas had to be completely obliterated, smashed into the ground. And that's what, like, any kind of a ceasefire pains me, because it just guarantees that we're going to have another, my lifetime is going to be filled with more of this. And I always think of this photo, I'll share it, which is the photo of the Japanese surrendering in World War II. And I'm not a history expert, but wouldn't it be pretty amazing if we could get, I don't know, the Ayatollahs or someone coming down and surrendering and saying that from this point on, political Islam, if it still exists, has to be neutered, has to be completely spayed, has to be defanged, has to be turned off from this just decade and decade on aggression towards Israel and the rest writ large.
Yeah, Anders, I'll go to you in just a second, but even more famous picture when it comes to the Japanese surrender is the one they published in all the newspapers, or the US forced to publish. It was a picture of Douglas MacArthur and the Emperor of Japan. And if you look at the height difference between the two of those, because Douglas MacArthur was like 7 foot something, while the Emperor of Japan was like a 5'6" or something like that. And that was like a clear showing, like this is just a general from America, and this is your emperor, and this is how they look. And that was like what really brought the Japanese people out. Like this, the emperor is no god. It's just human as any other, and we've lost this. And so just to mention one more thing about when it comes to war, it really has to be about defending your own people and to end it as soon as possible. I mean, if you are arguing against the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or even the firebombing of Tokyo or any other Japanese cities, I mean, just look up Battle of Okinawa, and it's an island you probably don't even know where it is, and it's really small, and it was just one part of a sort of like a full-on invasion of Japan. Just look at those casualties and try to imagine what it would take to actually take over all of Japan if you wanted to do it sort of the Israeli style right now. But
here's, I don't know if it's the photo, Daniel, but it's kind of one of the photos, and just kind of, this is the type of surrender, secession you need. You need to make a spectacle about beating the enemy completely. I mean, Michael, this is much more your forte, but annihilating them into the ground. Otherwise, to Rand's point, you're just kind of waving handkerchiefs, and a couple people dying, a couple people die more. It just goes on an infinitum. Make it stop.
Just to show the actual picture, this is actually it. So this was published at all the Japanese. It was forced to publish out in all the Japanese newspaper. Basically, yeah, you guys surrender. But Anders, what did you think about Muin Rubani's sort of like how he took this article and sort of again, because some people might say, well, this is just a health journal. They're just putting out the numbers, but how did the people take it?
Yeah, no, I agree with Michael. Of course, it's laughable that, is that they obviously did their homework. I mean, that he can keep a straight face sitting there. Either he's stupid or he's just, has a really good poker face. It's, yeah. So I don't know how much we need to comment on those numbers again, but whatever method they put into getting to the number of indirect deaths being from 3 to 15. I mean, that's just a laughable range, 3 to 15. And we're making it conservative, so let's go with 4. Okay, so we're going with 4. But regardless if there even was any scientific credibility behind those numbers, they still apply it to the numbers from the Gaza Health Ministry. So it's garbage in, garbage out. I mean, it's the numbers. I mean, you can't really they mean nothing. They mean nothing. And again, back to what I said initially and what both Jonathan and Michael have said, this is war. People die. Okay? If you don't want that to happen, stop the war. And that's all on Hamas again. Now, a ceasefire, as we see now in southern Lebanon and that everybody's talking about, I mean, that would be the most tragic outcome of this, because that is a guarantee that this will continue in perpetuity. And I'm a strong advocate for occupation. Israel should occupy both Gaza, both the West Bank and southern Lebanon at a minimum, and just rule it until the culture has changed. And start opening it up economically and to allow for Palestinians to achieve prosperity, to appeal to their self-interest. But a ceasefire it won't do anything. It will just cause more deaths, and those numbers, for whatever they're worth, they will just continue to go up and up and up.
I don't know. I don't live in the area. We have a lot of people on the ARCUK who are in Israel right now, and we're able to keep them on and keep the whole network going because of all of your contributions. So I'll just take a moment to say, we need them. Well, we provide every day. We're here 24, not 21st. Yeah, we are. We're here every day with a new programming inspired by Rand's objectivism. So we need super chats, 5 pounds, 20 pounds, 100 pounds. It means a whole much, great deal for us to be able to keep us on the air. I'll just say, my sense, if I was if I was in Palestine, what would I do? But gee, you look at the difference in wealth between the Palestinians and Israelis, and it's almost shocking. And I guess I would think, if I cared about my self-interest, I would want Israel to come, and I would want to live in Israel. I mean,
just look at the Arabs that currently live in Israel, right?
Well, I mean, the average per capita GDP in Israel is $52,000. In Palestine, it's about 2,500. So it's thousands and thousands of times more wealthy in Israel. Why? Is the water different in Israel? Gee, I don't know. Is the wheat different? No, it's the ideas. And this is just Rand's whole thing about the power of ideas. Ideas move the world. Better ideas, a couple miles away mean for such a better quality of life, such a better life, a real life. But until they change their ways, they can't have it. And they won't.
Yeah, and just on the water thing, water is different, because when you have free minds, you actually can desalinate the water and actually drink the water that was formerly undrinkable. So this is what happens when you free minds, when you allow, but as you said, there is no difference in land, or there is no big difference between, parts of Gaza and parts of Israel. It is only because, and since we are no determinists, we are no racists, we know there is no difference between, just because you have a different color of your skin, that somehow makes you different. No, it is philosophical.
The whole Middle East could be so incredibly wealthy and vibrant, and not with these state-controlled, things like in Saudi Arabia, these futuristic, really horrific cities, but like actual creation of minds, as you said, Daniel, how many millions of young, interesting entrepreneurs who could be influenced by Miss Rand, it could be influenced by Western ideas, and transform the world into something that, it truly be. I mean, well, Israel's the best example. Israel in 1940 versus Israel in 2020. They took the desert and they built a land of milk and honey and tremendous wealth. It could happen anywhere else.
We have a super chat from Bonnie, thank you so much, and a super chat from Ginger, thank you so much. Ginger says, keep talking. Jonathan, don't know how much this weighs, probably not a pound. But talking about the support of Ayn Rand Centre UK, let me remind people today's episode of the reality show is sponsored by James Brown's new book, A Black Hole in Economics, Money Creation and Its Consequences. I'm putting the link to buy that in the chat. You can also find it in the description. And just to read you a little bit from the introduction, this book is for anyone who wants to understand money creation in the modern economy. In the following pages, I'll explain how money is created, who creates it, and the consequences of money creation, both good and bad. Whether you're an investor navigating volatile markets, a student searching for understanding, or a conscientious voter who wants to stay well informed, this book is for you. Get ready to have your assumptions challenged as we dive headfirst into what I call the black hole of economic knowledge. After reading this book, you'll emerge with insights that will transform your perspective on money, banks, and their impact on your life. Let me also remind that the royalties from the sale of the book go towards the support of Ayn Rand Centre UK. So you both can make yourself more knowledgeable, make you really understand one of the most important concepts when it comes to sort of modern age civilization, money. Ayn Rand talks a lot about money and what it represents. So it's important to understand what they stand for. And this way you can also support Ayn Rand Centre UK. We have a super chat from Alex. Thank you so much. She says, give super chat so that Michael and I can get a salary. Definitely. When most people working for Ayn Rand Centre UK are volunteers. So, the more support we have, the better we can make it and really more high quality. All right. Anything you guys like to add, or should we go into? There's one video from the recent Piers Morgan show that I like to show. All right.
Just before you do that, real
yep.
quick, Daniel, one of the things that I think all of us listening to this show should go out there and talk to folks about, and that is that there's no substitute for thinking. And I'm not saying this facetiously, I mean it, because there's a lot of people who turn on the TV or turn on X or turn on whatever and listen to folks and think that they're somehow experts. Now, these two guys that you saw before who are, put up there as sort of experts who are deep thinkers, who understand the mysteries behind the Oz behind the curtain. We really all have to stop that. We really do. And one of the things that I try to teach my employees, and I truly believe in life, you have to think for yourself. All you need to do is do what Jonathan just said and take a look at these different societies. You go see the skyscrapers in Tel Aviv with more and more cranes going up there and building office buildings, largely for international companies, not so much internal. Israel's 10 million people. And you look even in Jerusalem, which is becoming a mecca for manufacturing and all kinds of things, and a lot of the other cities in Israel. And you then move to a place like Gaza, which used to be an agricultural set of fields and was actually very productive agriculturally before Israel left. And after Israel left, it was largely destroyed. And all of the billions of dollars of your taxpayer dollars and the Europeans' taxpayer dollars and all the support, and of course from Qatar and Iran, have gone into making a tunnel system, which, as I've said many times on the show, puts the London subway system, metro system to shame. This is where the money went, to put missiles into people's houses, to put terror tunnels all over, and to stock up Hamas, and only do that. That's where the money went. That's where all of this aid went, 90% of it. And really, to think that the experts who allowed this to happen, people that were the precursors of Tony Blinken and some of this really the most ineffective and frankly harmful secretaries of state in America and across the world, of the UN, the European Union, and so on, to allow this to happen. It is very simple to use your eyes to understand the facts. Imagine if that wealth, that money that other people created, instead of going into destruction, was gone into construction. And you don't have to be an expert to believe that. So I really ask everybody, when somebody starts with their baloney about the poor, suffering Palestinian people, ask them where the billions of dollars in aid went to and what happened.
Yeah, and it's really hard to imagine. I mean, it's hard to imagine a million, and it's impossible for people to imagine a billion. But if you understand what money stands for, if you understand it's a productivity that has been basically captured by this thing and can unlock more productivity in a different region or somewhere else, or can drive more creation, can drive more industry. And what it has been used, it's been used for destruction, for almost exclusively for destruction of Israel. And just to imagine what sort of philosophy represents the people who support it, the people who are okay with this and prefer this over living in a peaceful society, living in a civilized society, in a productive society. But let's listen to and really this one Piers Morgan interview has been worth it, because this is the third time we're watching it. But there has been a really interesting statement there, and this is from I think last week around.
Okay, so the Lancet, an independent medical journal, recently published a piece that claimed that 186,000 people have been killed in Gaza. A lot, 70% of those women and children. You're talking about a genocide.
It's amazing. Again, this 15 seconds, he managed to put in everything. 186,000 women and children, 70% women and children, and genocide. Now, again, this show, and this is from last week. So the article, he said recently, the article was published 5 months ago, and he keeps repeating it. And this shows how once you release something, once you made something, once Lancet has released this, even if they pulled it back, even if they dissolved it, now it's out there. And now people basically, we didn't show the rest of the interview, but no one challenges him on it. He just says it, 186,000, and people will just hear it and will accept it and will be like, whoa, what the hell? Like, that's an insane number. And you can also see how sort of like propaganda, you don't even need to think about reality, because he says the 70% of women and children. The Lancet article doesn't talk about it. He just takes the number because 70%, not 1% less, not 1% more, and again he repeats the number, which
and throw in a couple of genocide, and QED, I suppose.
Yeah, and just to mention also, it shows the sort of the almost like a parroting nature of propaganda, because the number should be old by now. The reason why the number was 186,000 back then is because, according to Gaza health ministry, the number of dead were 37,000. That was basically multiplied by 5, and you get the 186,000. So if the same formula was taken, the number right now should be about 216,000-ish, basically. But don't think about it, just repeat the number.
I mean, isn't it more of a comment on the depravity of the Palestinian people that they haven't submitted at this point? If that number is accurate, what is wrong with them that they won't give up a couple hundred hostages, I'm sure, who are mostly dead by now? But why won't they give up? Are they that committed to destroying Israel? Are they that committed to killing Jews that even after, if all these people are dead, that they're still going? They haven't waved the white flag. They haven't signed the treaty. They haven't bound down. They haven't given up their arms. Like, what is wrong with them if those numbers are true? It's not about Israel. It's about them.
Yeah, I mean, Anders, what do you think? As Jonathan has said, if the numbers are true, we know that the Palestinians are holding the hostages. We like the civilians are holding the hostages in their home. We know, or we are pretty sure that Hamas is at a very low point now. It should be that there are not many Hamas members left. There are not many terrorists left in Gaza, yet we still hear nothing. We don't hear from the Palestinian people about standing up, about wanting something different. I mean, just recently there was a report about Hamas accepting a post-war in Gaza, sort of the way it's going to be conducted. And it's like, well, why is Hamas even representing the Palestinians? And that's what do you think?
Well, this is speculation only. I don't know what kind of hold Hamas still has on the population in Gaza. I'm sure there are people who would surface once the threat is gone, but probably also a fairly significant number of the population there still supports the cause. So it's probably a mix of the two. And again, I with the risk of repeating myself, I think that is why a ceasefire is disastrous. And you need to go in there and root them out. And after you have rooted them out, you have to rule that area for as long as it takes. No, there can't be any international coalitions or something like that, because we have tried that already and that doesn't work anywhere. So it would have to be, and I know the Israelis don't like this because they would rather go home and tend to their gardens, but they are in the wrong neighborhood for that. So the only solution I can see is that Israel goes in there and unilaterally just set up I wrote an article about the United States of the Levant, where they would set up something that would unleash the productive powers of the Palestinian people, because as someone said earlier, I mean, of course, they're humans, right? They're self-interested on some level. And you just have to encourage that and have them focus on productive pursuits rather than just hating Israelis, because that won't get them anywhere. Yeah, that's pretty much where we are.
What's so heartbreaking on some level, Anders, is how non-self-interested they are. These people have given up generations and generations to self-sacrifice for Allah, or for some mysticism, or for the nation, or for the betterment of the Islamic people, for all of these causes except for themselves. That's what's
I agree with that, but I mean, you can make the analogous or the comparison with Japan. I mean, Japan was utterly collectivist, and they did anything for the emperor and for the collective, and for Japan, super nationalist. And despite that, I mean, yes, they had a industrial infrastructure in place and such that obviously helped them, but still, it can be done. I'm not saying that'll happen tomorrow. It'll take a couple of generations probably, but I mean, what other solution is there?
Yeah, I think you have to. I agree that Japan did it, and it's actually quite remarkable because they moved a society from really in 180 degrees. But given the history of most of the Middle East, and frankly most Islamic countries, I'm not aware, frankly, and I'm not trying to be, I'm being critical on purpose because I just don't know historically if there are any good examples of Islamic countries that have given up this focus on deep Islamic tradition, with suppressing women and so on and so forth. And even the countries that have done relatively good things and have peace, Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates in particular have peace treaties with Israel, and we fly back and forth there and all this kind of stuff. And even now with the wars, we've seen little, they've not backed off from any of this. I mean, Saudi Arabia is playing both sides of the spectrum, as they love to do. They did after 9/11, and they continue to do. But I think we're all in the world underestimating the hold that this radical Islamic, it's not just militancy, this radical Islamic traditions have on these folks. I mean, they just haven't been able to join the world. And they haven't.
But I would push back a little bit there, Michael.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah,
please, I hope so.
If you look fundamentalist Iran, it was not great under the Shah and before that, but it was, compared to today, it was very westernized. And if you talk to Iranians today, I mean, under the surface, they're still very
That's a fair point.
Now, I know the Persians are different from the Arabs, but if you look at Beirut, if you go back 50 years, I mean, it was the pearl of the Middle East, the Paris of the Middle East, and it was, and the region has a very long trading tradition going back thousands of years. So the self-interest in there, I mean, is there. It's just a question of bringing it out. And again, no, it won't be easy, but what other options are there?
Yeah, I just asked you to clarify on Lebanon, just because my understanding that Lebanon was much more Christian influenced. I know it wasn't majority Christian, particularly Beirut, which I think back then used to be majority Christian. Of course, the Christians have been pretty much removed from Lebanon. That's not anything anybody wants to talk about. But I think there was a lot more Christian influence there. Iran, good point. And yet they're still living under these horrendous, even after the revolution now, they just can't seem to get their act together and get out of it.
Yeah, and that's why, taking out Iran's military capacity, nuclear capacity,
Yeah.
and oil producing capacity is number one on the list, because that will basically cut the heads off the Hydra, if you like.
And that's to just say the irony of so much of the criticism from ignorant people we've covered over the past year plus has been how Israel is this religious state, right? Israel is this hyper Jewish state. And it's, having been to Israel three times myself, Michael, I believe you live in Israel. You've lived in Israel.
Halftime. Yep. Halftime.
I mean,
yep.
My experience is anything but. I felt like Israel was very much like, like big U.S. cities. It could have easily felt like Chicago or New York or parts of L.A. with, as Michael said, big skyscrapers and no public religion that you really saw. There were some churches, there were some synagogues, but there wasn't like, in my saying, feel free to put this on a bumper sticker if you hashtag me, the more religious, the more suspicious. I've said that before. Like, the more religious a culture, the more suspicious I am of it. The more religious a person, the bigger the religious iconography they're wearing, an icon they're wearing, the more suspicious I am of it. And, Anders, to your point, I mean, those places in the Middle East, they weren't as religious back then, Iran, during that period. It wasn't as militant. And that's just the irony, is that Israel is seeing as being this hyper-religious society when it's very secular, very cosmopolitan, and very advanced.
Yeah, and maybe just to finish on the discussion about what might be the difference between the Islamic culture and, let's say, the Germanic, Japanese culture, I think that there are a few, interesting differences. One, well, I think the most important example is we just haven't seen the same amount of really sort of putting down an ideology, basically calling out the evil of a certain ideology and attacking it directly and basically saying this is not the way to go. I mean, no one has called out Islam from, like main global leaders, or the sort of like the mystical nature of it, or rather mysticism, I think, is much more important, because even Germany and Japan weren't sort of like religious in the sort of sense we think about, but they were incredibly mystical. And I think that's the much more important point. Similar to how sort of like modern Christianity is simply not as mystical as it used to be. That's why I think it's more compatible with or sort of it's more reformed, more sort of mild, basically. It's not as crazy as Islam is right now. So that's what has to be attacked, mysticism, and it simply hasn't been. So I think that plays the biggest part in why we simply haven't seen something similar. But sort of, we have a few more minutes, so I wanted to go into some interesting things that were in the Lancet report 5 months ago, and read it out. So first, editorial note at the end was: the Lancet Group takes a neutral position with respect to territorial claims in published text and institutional affiliations. And I don't know what's disturbing me more, the idea that you are taking a neutral position when you call out for a ceasefire, or the idea that you would take a neutral position when it comes to Israel-Hamas conflict. Like, yeah, it's tough. As Piers Morgan liked to say, I have a moral quandary. He just cannot decide who's the bad guys here. Reading out. Oh, well, I think there was one more thing, and then I'll go to you guys.
I'm going to just say, we've seen, the pro-Hamas, we've covered it over the last year, the pro-Hamas contingent disrupt everything, businesses, big and small, highways, hospitals, like they have disrupted anything. So on some level, if you're running a corporation, you have a little bit of self-interest, because that, Starbucks, all these major Fortune 500 companies, even if they did business with Israel, have been targeted by these complete shitheads. So, the Lancet is obviously nefarious and untrustworthy, but, you pay a real political price.
Yeah, and claiming to be neutral in a battle between good and evil puts you on the side of evil. So.
And just quickly, one more thing that I found really amusing. A report from February 7, 2026, at the time when the direct death toll was 28,000, estimated that without a ceasefire, there would be between 58,260 deaths and 85,750 deaths by August 2024. So,
Sure, that was, are you sure that was 750, not 752? Okay.
So yeah, they were predicting basically right now the Gaza number is 44,000. They were predicting the double 6 months ago. Well, sorry, August, 4 months ago. So again, what are these numbers? It's similar to like the environmental predictions, like the world is gonna end in 15 years if we don't do anything, and never anything happens. I mean, at some point, it's like, well, what are these?
But
What do they
I would
mean?
actually come back to these guys and say, you know what, you're right. In fact, I think you're twofold off.
Right.
So go back to the question that Jonathan and Anders wrote. Why is the leadership of Hamas, to the extent that any of them are still alive, continuing this war? They're going to be destroyed. And frankly, with Trump in the White House, and he made some comments yesterday, and we'll see what happens, there's not going to be any of this waffling anymore from the US government. There's no more support for this crap. And I don't that's the problem with and Israel does this all the time. They get into a debate about people about whether they should have the right to defend themselves. It's absurd. If you even answer that question, you've dove into the middle of a discussion that's just wrong. And it's got to be tougher. We have got to put our feet down. Sorry.
Ultimately, like this, I very similar to the ICC, like something that people take as having great weight and prestige when it really doesn't. It's just a piece of paper, written by bureaucrats who are, siding with evil. So, the Lancet, certainly doesn't have the prestige that it once did. And to Michael's
absolutely,
point, whatever the number is irrelevant. That is not even the fundamental issue at hand.
Let me thank our super chatters. Thank you, Loricetto, for the super chat. He says, for the team, although the topic makes me ill, it's important to talk about. I mean, this really is how propaganda is made. You put it in a reputable article and then people quote it with no looking into what do the numbers actually mean. But let me also remind people again that today's episode of the reality show is sponsored by James Brown's new book, A Black Hole in Economics, Money Creation and Its Consequences, and also that all royalties go to the support of Ayn Rand Centre UK, so you can both educate yourself and help us support the cause, help us make the world a better place, help people realize what is the way to actually think about it. Anders, any last thoughts, and where can people find you?
Yeah, when it comes to this propaganda, there are actually outlets out there who are debunking these numbers. So if you search for it on the internet, I mean, to either debunk the Gaza casualty numbers or some similar sentence, you'll get some pretty good articles that are drilling down into this and basically say what we're saying here, but with some more research behind it. So that's what they do. And then, yes, I just echo the sentiment, the support Ayn Rand Centre UK. And if you're looking for the perfect Christmas present or Hanukkah present, my book, Think Right or Wrong, Not Left or Right, is right out there waiting for you. And I'm sure you want to pack it together with Jonathan's textbook on Americanism as well. So,
Michael, where can people find you?
Well, I will put a plug in again for Jonathan's book, The Text. This is a phenomenal book. And I think, as I said before, I think it's the last political book I read from start to finish. And it's beautifully done, really, and well worth the time. Kaufman with 2 Fs on LinkedIn.
Jonathan, any last words, and where can people find you?
Anders' book is recommended. Jim Brown's book is also recommended. There's so many great things to get into this holiday season, including a new textbook of Americanism. People say, oh, I know Ayn Rand, XYZ. She wrote explicitly about America, about Western values. This is a short, easy read. It's at Amazon. Avail yourself of it. And also, thank you for supporting what we're doing here every day, with original programming inspired by Rand's work. It's because of you that we're here, and we thank you once again.
We also have a super chat from Alex. Thank you so much. He says they would have platformed and defended Lyshenko. I believe he's like a Soviet scientist, I think would be the most direct description. And also, let me remind people, we have Atlas Shrugged Book Club starting in about a minute or so. And you can find me on my YouTube channel. Then links to everybody's stuff is going to be in the description, as well as Jim Brown's new book. So make sure to support us also that way. Thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you in a bit. Bye-bye.
Thank you.